Welcome to another mini quest. Today I'm going to show you the whole process of taking an in-game scene from World of Warcraft and making a diorama out of it. In our case, the landscape of Elwynn Forest and little MURLOC Village. It's totally up to you to take everything from this video and create your own dioramas from different video games. These are the main colors we are going to use. We start our build with a small piece of plywood. I like to buy these little cheap packages from the hardware store. Then I got some thick XPS also from the hardware store. I put the plywood on top and made some simple marks with my hobby knife. Don't worry about the huge scratch on my hand, I got that from playing with my dog Misha. The next step is to cut everything with a hot wire. Let's see if everything fits. And it does. Then I drew a line to mark the area that will stay above our resin and cut a hang with some knives and in 60-degree angle. This will get everything in a rough shape. Make sure to work very carefully though. I can't stress enough how badly one can hurt themselves with such knives. Some PVA on our plywood to glue everything together. The epoxy won't flow between the XPS and plywood later, like it could when we would be using hot glue, which is hard to seal because it gets cold quickly and we don't have much control over it. Additionally, 2 clamps to fix everything so it stays in its place. Looks good so far. Time to go for a walk and gather some sticks for our next step. Thanks Misha, those will come in handy. I also printed some MURLOCs that can be put onto our base to get some kind of scale and perspective. The cool thing about video games is that you can use it to get the proportions of the characters and environment right. Great source material. So I drew all the points for the logs and drilled them, but make sure to don't drill through the plywood. Then I put our sticks into the holes and cut them to a fitting length. After I had all the sticks ready, I got them all out again, pushed some hot glue into the hole and put them back in, one after another. 2 years ago I was in a rehabilitation clinic for several weeks and the friends I made there gathered a few coffee sticks every day. So thanks Nina, Lisa and Bratan, these are great. I told you I would need them. I glued the coffee sticks onto the branches to give everything more stability and put even more sticks across them. German engineering at its finest. Some more branches I cut to length to fit between our coffee sticks. A lot of super glue that will hold everything in its place, and then the sticks one after another and an additional layer of super glue on top. We need to replicate that on every building. For the vertical logs that will hold the thatched roofs, we use super glue again. And again, more coffee sticks. To build up some volume for the roofs, I decided to cut some cardboard into rectangles and glue them together with hot glue. This step is just to get a rough shape, so we don't have to use much Milliput later on. More hot glue and more sticks. It starts to look like something. I wanted to super glue some yarn on the logs, but that didn't work out. Okay, let's distribute some human skulls from Greenstuff world around the place. In the next step, we mix some 2-component Milliput together and create some roof shapes. We will add some more layers to build up the volume as soon as the first layer has dried. Then some green stuff which I rolled on the ground to get it in shape, then I placed it on every spot where I initially wanted the yarn to be. It just doesn't look like actual rope because I'm still pretty bad at sculpting, so I need you to act like it worked. Maybe some rope, maybe some roots, whatever you prefer. Do not use a hairdryer or an oven to accelerate the process. I did and forgot that everything is held together by hot glue, which melts pretty fast. And it starts to look less like something and more like a MURLOC Village. I thought I could make a chest that would look like the big better chest in World of Warcraft, using coffee sticks and green stuff. But it just didn't look good and I threw it all away. Maybe that's a problem for future Sege. Back to our diorama, where we start to get some texture on our XPS by applying loads of PVA glue, first on the top surface of our mountain, then some dried dirt that was in an oven for several hours before. After that, we add even more PVA glue on the lower half of our diorama and add some sand instead of dirt. We do it this way to get some texture variation between the parts that will be underwater and the part that stays above water level. And the last layer of heavy watered down PVA to hold everything in place. And guess what comes next? More PVA of course, but this time on the roofs. Followed by some miniature grain field and wreaths from bush. The roof needed multiple layers of these and it took me one day to get it in shape. Then I mixed some PVA with cheap black acrylic paint and covered the whole base with it. I printed some decoration stuff last year and I don't even know where the files were from. These fish bits are from Games Workshop Gloomtide Shipwreck. I guess one of these would look great in our diorama. And some bigger orc skulls from Greenstuff World. Time for Misha to check in and look at the stuff I'm doing, instead of petting him and giving him attention. Then I cut down the roof with a pair of scissors while Misha watches me. Let's add some slate stones and skulls onto our diorama, but not too much stuff. I know we could make a whole detailed underwater world full with plants and fish and stuff, but in the game it's quite empty, and I guess I like the simplicity of that. Feel free to do whatever you like though. And a little 3D printed torch between the huts. I love these little frogs and printed 2 of those in different sizes. They will be an absolute pain to paint, but it will be worth it. Now everything is primed with Citadel Primer Corax White. We start painting all the wood with the contrast paint Wildwood Contrast. This will take some time. And some Mechanical Standard Grey for all the rocks. And Race Brown for all the skulls. Then a base coat of Everland Sunset for both roofs. Be careful when painting though, it tends to splatter the yellow color around. A wash of Nuln Oil for all the stones next. Skeleton Horde Contrast for all the skulls. And Cassandra Yellow for both roofs. While everything dries, we dry brush all the wooden parts with some Baneblade Brown to give them more color variation. The ground will be painted next with XY88, and while the first layer dries, we continue to use our black acrylic paint to redo all the edges. Next up, I mixed some dead white into our Mechanical Standard Grey and started dry brushing all the stones. Then some more dead white to get a brighter tone, followed by a lighter dry brush. Another dry brush of pure dead white for all the skulls, and a second layer of XV88. A heavy wash of Argrax Earthshade will be our next step. At that point I ordered 3 pots of Argrax Earthshade a month ago from 3 different places, and on that day one arrived. Still waiting for the others though. After everything has dried, we return with a heavy dry brush of XV88 on the ground and a dry brush of Everland Sunset on the roofs, followed by a lighter dry brush with Aerial Yellow. Now comes the most tedious part of the tutorial, painting all the ropes or roots we sculpted with Greenstuff before, using Zendri dust. 2 layers later I washed everything with Seraphim Sapphire. For the torch I used Aerial Yellow and put some flat red above, while the yellow was still wet. Then I carefully started to mix those colors into each other to create some tones of orange. This technique is called wet blending, and it can gather some great results. I don't want to go into much detail about painting the deco stuff though, take whatever colors you would like. The eels are painted with Airborne Black as first, but then I returned to our ropes and roots and started to give them some layers of Zendri dust and dead white. Some gunmetal or lead belcher for the torch, make sure to not touch the fire. And then I gave the eels multiple lighter dry brushes like with the stones, and painted the eyes yellow and the plants beneath the ears with green color. I started to base coat both frogs, but then I needed a break from painting and stopped. I mean, we got enough to do, so why not switch to something else to keep us motivated. Let's pick up some PVA and prepare some areas for our flock, mainly on the bottom of the logs and around our ropes and roots to hide the fact that I still don't know what they look like. While the PVA is still wet, I started to sprinkle down our first dark green flock and then a lighter green flock to cover all the areas left. That looks much better. Now we take our miniature reeds we already used for the roofs and put some on the ground with some superglue. Make sure you keep the water level in mind when choosing where to put them. I think they should be right at the riverbank, slightly in the water. This might look easy, but they keep falling down and I glued my fingers multiple times. Next up, some flowers, bushes and grass for the sake of variation. I think we got ourselves a nice little landscape here. Does it look like Elwynn Forest to you? Enough about the surface, let's dive underwater and start putting some plants there. I got these plastic plants and poked some holes into the ground. Followed by a drop of superglue and our little plant. I'm not going to paint them though. They are already green and I think they will look just fine later on. I wanted to have one MURLOC in the water, so that one has to be painted and ready before we pour in the epoxy. Make sure to check my green MURLOC painting tutorial if you are interested on a simple way to paint your MURLOC in 60 minutes. Fixed with some superglue and ready to pour. Welcome to my third mistake in this tutorial. I started by cutting down some acrylic glass to create a fitting mold. Then I sealed everything with silicone. It's funny how at this exact moment I can see the biggest mistake, but while I was doing it, I didn't. So look at this little detail here. I missed a spot. I didn't want to use superglue because the last time it just melted under the heat of the chemical reaction from the epoxy. Since I already got a new not so hot epoxy, that was a dumb decision to make. While the silicone was drying, I started to cut out the reeds to different lengths to give them a more natural look, and I painted both the frogs. And another wash of Agla's Earthshade because I still wasn't satisfied with the roofs. Then I cleaned the mold with isopropanol and put our diorama in once everything has dried. A last professional check on the mold and I still didn't see my mistake. The bag needed to be sealed too, and while I started doing exactly that, I forgot another thing I wanted to do. I forgot to glue the whole diorama on the bottom. This is my new epoxy for extra thick layers with low heat reaction. And the hardener, we need to mix them 100 parts to 32 parts and gain about 600 grams of epoxy for our pour. Because I had some bad time coloring the epoxy, I ordered some cheap colorants from Amazon for 12 euros. Before we start, some things about safety. Be aware that we are working with chemicals here, and if you are a beginner, make sure to research everything about your epoxy, molds and safety. This is no joke and I can't stress this enough. I'm not a professional either, but I had my fair share of handling chemicals in the workspace. After mixing for 5 minutes, we get to see the pour. I love seeing this, it has something magical. Initially, some epoxy started dropping, and many layers of silicone couldn't stop it. I'll explain what went wrong so you don't make the same mistakes I did. Number 1, we poured in the resin. Number 2, the resin found a way under the acrylic sheet because I didn't seal it. Number 3, the resin also found a way to flow right under our diorama. Number 4, the whole diorama started to move upwards, pushed from the bottom by the resin. And number 5, the silicone groove on the back of our diorama gets damaged because of the movement. And now we reach the full catastrophe and the resin flows everywhere. Getting some flashbacks here from my last epoxy fail. Watch the video if you already haven't. The good news, I was still able to save the diorama. Whatever, let's make it right this time. I cut some acrylic glass again and cleaned everything with isopropanol, but this time I used 500 kilograms of hot glue to fix everything together. You are going to stay in there this time, epoxy. But because I had a very cheap hot glue gun, I decided to loot my girlfriend's stuff and get her gun instead. This was much better and I filled every inch of this diorama with hot glue, just in case you know. Gluing the acrylic glass right onto our diorama should prevent the thing from moving like the last time. Everything looks good and I already got a good feeling about this. I also glued the whole diorama to the ground and then started to add another very thick layer of silicone. I don't care how messy it looks, it has to work. mixing the resin again. And welcome to the second pour, my friends. Glad you're still watching. This looks so cool, why does it have to be such a mess working with epoxy? After 3 days everything was cured and I started removing the silicone and the mold, which by the way was an absolute pain in the ass. I damaged the XPS and black paint coat while doing so, but I was able to keep the glossy finish of the resin. Get over here! Needs a little work, but overall pretty nice. I started to cut the edges with a very sharp hobby knife, and I didn't cut myself this time. The miniature gods are on my side this time. To hide the damaged XPS, I cut some black cardboard and glued it onto the diorama with super glue. I also bought some wooden molding from the hardware store that will look nice around our diorama and hide all the ugly parts. 3 sheets of plywood of the same kind we used as our base will help me to lift the diorama up and get a nice height for the molding. Then I measured the needed length and saw the moldings in a 45-degree angle, making sure everything fits together. And PVA will help us to glue everything together, while some hot glue from the bottom will make sure everything stays in place. We move on to making some waves with an acrylic medium called Soft Gel Gloss. Just put it on the surface and sculpt some waves with a brush. Don't make the layers too thick though, because they won't dry then and stay white. After the first layer dried, I put some additional layers on top, creating a more dynamic and realistic surface. I love the videos of mini breaks and talked about sanding the epoxy edges, making some waves with a Dremel or installing some LEDs into the wooden molding. But after so many mistakes I didn't want to push my luck and ruin everything with another mistake. Maybe I would scratch the epoxy and ruin it. Or I hit the MURLOC in the water and have to paint him again. Nah, that won't happen. I will leave everything as it is. As long as our waves dry, I put some Milliput into the damaged corner of our wooden molding and damaged parts. Not sure how the dried Milliput will look when I glaze over the wood later, but I don't got any more wood putty and I have to work with the things I got. What is a MURLOC Village without Murlocs? So I painted many more with a blue color. Watch the tutorial on that one if you're interested. So we have a green one with a nice contrast to the blue water and many blue ones on the ground with a nice contrast to the upper terrain. Let's distribute some of these little Murlocs. I think Gloomy Kid did a fantastic job while sculpting these. You'll find the link to the models as usual in the video description. A light dry brush with Vallejo water texture will give our waves the final touch. And our last water detail will be many green dots with mood green all around the plants on the riverbank. I'm sure there are much more things you could do, but I've been working on this diorama for 3 weeks and I think it's time to finish it. Then I filled the corners where we used Milliput and painted the broken areas black again. Finally, I painted the wooden molding with walnut wood glaze about 5 times to get a dark color, and now let's take a look at our finished diorama. I hope to see you again in the next video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And see you next time. Bye!